Welcome to the Industrial Control System Information Sharing and Analysis Center's monthly public briefing. We'll take another minute or two to give those who are still logging in a chance to complete the process. During this time, I will provide some housekeeping guidelines. If you're calling in on the phone, you will find a PIN number on the GoToWebinar application. Please enter this PIN into your phone and press pound. This will allow us to manage any background noise. My name is Debbie Wendell, and I will be moderating today's session. I serve as Community Director for the Center and oversee the Center's human-to-human information dissemination mechanisms. In case you are not yet aware of the full range of collaborative products we have to offer, make sure that you check out our LinkedIn group, Twitter account, and website blog posts. Plus, we hope that you will take full advantage of these briefings, as well as our Thursday open forum discussion sessions. Our goal is to get our members accurate, timely, and actionable information in a way that best suits their needs. Today's briefing, The Arc of History, the Inevitability of Knowledge Sharing, features a panel of distinguished subject matter experts, including Kevin Morley, Security and Preparedness Program Manager for the American Water Works Association, and Jacques Brados, Water Services Technology Manager at the City of Glendale, Arizona. ICS ISAC Chair Chris Blask will be facilitating today's discussion. During today's presentation, Chris will take the first few minutes to lay out some background information to frame the issue. Then each panelist will be introduced and have the opportunity to present their opening remarks. Next, the panel will spend about 35 to 40 minutes for their discussion. Finally, there will be time for questions and answers and open discussion at the end of the presentation. At any point during the call, if you would like to ask a question, you may use the hand raise feature in the GoToWebinar application. And when speaking, if you would please introduce yourself and indicate your industry affiliation. After the meeting, a recording of this session will be available on the Center's website. So now, without any further delay, Chris, over to you for your background presentation.
Thank you, Debbie, and thanks to the people who are here today and listening out in the future. Since we have a couple water folks with us here today, we're going to use the history of water systems to demonstrate the topic at hand here, how we're moving through a period of connectivity, not just technically, but as a matter of information and knowledge sharing. And there isn't really anything more primal than water. You know, while we spend a great deal of time focusing on the electric sector in the current era, it's been pointed out that you can survive without power, perhaps, but you can't survive without water. And as we look at how we've gained control of this asset, of this resource, we can literally go back to the dawn of mankind and before. You know, when our earliest ancestors learned that they can control water by doing certain things, by hollowing out gorges, they could move water from place to place, and therefore expand their range, expand their reach, leading them to the agriculture and settlements and so forth, and really all of the aspects of modern civilization that we see today. And these systems have evolved, and the knowledge in how to create them has been shared over this whole period. The qanats, there are 3,000-year-old qanats in the desert in North Africa that are still in use today, bringing water to arid locations and allowing civilization and agriculture to spread where it couldn't exist elsewhere. As far back as Rome, the knowledge in how to build plumbing systems was created and being shared and propagated. And all of these, the interconnectivity of infrastructure arose throughout this period, where water was not just water, but it's also power and transportation and communication and everything else. And over time, more and more complex systems have been created, and knowledge in how to build them has been shared more broadly until we got to the Victorian era a century and a half ago, and we're creating, fantastic chitty bang bang looking systems. And as a lot of us who geek out on physics and so forth note, the universe really is an information system. So it's not so much the artifacts themselves, but the knowledge of how to build them that is the point. And as these systems interconnected more and more, we ended up with the systems we recognize today, to the point that we have complex networks of information that are connected to each other, sharing the information and how to build systems to achieve various goals, bringing us to the point where we have systems like the City of Glendale, Arizona. It is itself another instantiation of the knowledge that has been shared in how to build interdependent systems and how to keep them running. And all this was, of course, well and good up until about 1979, when a bunch of degenerate hippies in the Pacific Northwest created a company called Microsoft, and really, as one arbitrary fun point to pick on, led us to this common era, where suddenly someone said it'd probably be a really good idea if we started hooking computers up to these infrastructure networks, which really takes us to where we are today. So over the past couple of decades, we've built more and more complex systems that are more and more interconnected, that are based on not just the management of the physical assets themselves, but the information about how those assets are managed. And as these systems have evolved, they've gotten more connected, and the need for information systems to manage them has become obvious and evident to the point that we build computers into them and networks, and we start seeing words like Ethernet and the Internet showing up, which again is all well and good. It certainly helps with the productivity and the complexity and the things that we can do to support the increasingly dense urban areas. But of course, there are evil hackers out there who will come and eat our brains and crash our systems, which is probably a bad thing. So what do we do about all this? Well, among the analogies we can use is following what water has done, for thousands of years. We've got infrastructure experiencing a lot of attacks. Expertise is in short supply and not getting better rapidly. It's very expensive to staff up to this. We can't live in isolated environments anymore. But we've had this knowledge of water management and how we do these systems shared for thousands and thousands of years. The precedent is obvious. So the path going forward is I think, equally obvious. The ability to share knowledge has built the infrastructure that we rely on right now. The ability to share that knowledge is going to be what we use to protect it. This knowledge does exist. Prior to this call, we were having a little background conversation. We'll talk about this some during the call, but there's things like the Roadmap to Secure Water that our panelist Kevin Morley wrote for the American Water Works Association in 2008, and a set of guidance they're producing today. There's, of course, the NIST cybersecurity framework that we all talk about a lot. There's the situational awareness reference architecture that the ICS ISAC membership is working on. And all of these things interlock, to give us the tools and the methodologies that are appropriate for each of us, given our budget and expertise and our place in the world, to do the parts of creating a knowledge-sharing system that allows individual facilities, municipalities like Glendale, Arizona, the regions, the Pacific Northwest, the Pacific Southwest, our entire nation here in America, and ultimately the world, to share the information we need to keep this stuff up and running. So SARA, that some of you will have heard about in 2014, will be expanding, breaks this down into 4 major areas based on the premise that a facility needs to know who they are, that they are a municipal water system that makes, Jacques, you expand on this, and makes decisions based on what city council says and has other various risks, threats, and capabilities. So they know what they have, they know the devices that make up their control system network and what they're controlling, they know what those systems are normally doing. They're able to consume information effectively that's shared with them. And this is, I think, a huge sticking point in knowledge sharing at this point. We're creating systems that are hard for the actual people who need to apply them to use. And so SARA and the new AWWA guidance is specifically looking at those sort of issues. And where possible, what these facilities can share with who in the outside world. I know Jacques is going to be talking about that. So with all of that, I want to break to Debbie, who will do a more thorough introduction for our panelists, get into question and answer. Please put questions into the GoToMeeting, raise your hands and so forth, and we'll involve you in this conversation. Debbie, it's all yours.
Jacques Brados serves as Water Services Technology Manager for the City of Glendale, Arizona, where he is primarily responsible for all aspects of the SCADA systems for 3 drinking water treatment plants, 2 water reclamation plants, and the distribution systems that provide safe drinking water to the city. In addition to the SCADA systems, he oversees many other aspects of the department's technology, including automatic meter reading and billing, GIS integration with several departments, pre-treatment tracking software, and citizen requests for service and resolution. Jacques ensures the availability and accuracy of over 22,000 parameters to system operators, as well as generates historical reporting for local and federal regulatory agencies. The city of Glendale, Arizona is located 9 miles northwest of Phoenix and is home to over 226,000 people. Chris, back to you.
Sure, thanks, Debbie. So, Jacques, I have some slides here from you. If you want to take the conch and run with it, give us your initial thoughts.
Thank you very much, Chris, for being invited, and I'm very happy to be a member of the ISAC process, relatively new member, and started off with some great conversation of course, I am deeply concerned about my process control system, and when other people are having problem with their process control system, I want to hear about that so I can check. But on the other side of, I also want to be a good member and share information that I might be having or issues I might be having with my process control system, but I'm really scared about doing that for lots of reasons that we'll get into. So I wanted to talk next about, next slide, please. So what I'm going to talk about is how to, where do I get my information, a little bit of history about that, what can I share. I'm going to talk about how for a while we felt safe because we were secure, and then maybe I'm not so safe, so who should I tell, and what happens to us if I tell, and then what is it I want to hear back. So next slide, please. Where do I get my information? I think you did a great job giving a summary of the history of that. And so the typical water plant operators in cities, especially in small rural towns, you just kind of talk to your next door neighbor and what are they doing and what's working and what's not working. And even process control systems in the very beginning were suspect about. Could they really do it, and we just trust the valves and electric motors, and that's about it. We like push buttons and relays. So finally, process automation starts working its way in through into the process, and I think that's a great analogy. Each one of the process control vendors that were out there were doing their own communications to talk to their own devices and open systems, and your slide is exactly right. Microsoft then gets introduced into the mix. And all the wonderful gifts as far as standardization is a wonderful thing, along with having the biggest target on their back as far as a threat vector into our process control system. So the benchmarking then comes from, where do I get information? Talking to other utilities, go to annual trade shows, and the American Water Works Association, of course, is one of the better and biggest vendor as far as that goes. And then just joining other utility information. So there was a lot of this sharing going back and forth about what do you do, what do you not do, and then it kind of becomes a discussion of what is it that we share. We do it this way. How do you do it? Do you guys allow remote access? Do you automatically log into your process control nodes? Is it running on your city business network? Are you going to separate the network? What are you doing for trending? What are you doing for passwords? What are you doing for alarm acknowledgments? For that matter, hardening the facilities and building access. You're just doing steel key locks? Are you keeping the doors propped open? And so there was some safety in that. Next slide, please. That talks about that I'm only telling one or two other people about what I have at my process and how we're doing it, and hearing how other people are doing it is, holy crud, we're way better than them, or holy crud, we've got to improve in this one area, and it was very friendly moving along. And there really wasn't a lot of fear at the time because we're water, nobody's out to get us, nothing bad ever happens here, we can leave the doors open, right? As we start rolling out computers, they've got computers, their city business computer, and SCADA is just another application. You log in on the city business computer. So you're surfing the internet, checking your email. Yeah, I'm watching my plant off in the corner from the supervisor side. Hey, there's concerns about that. We're behind the city IT firewall. Everything's good. You know what? We really ought to secure this a little bit more. And even the managers are coming back. How much money is it going to cost? Are there any federal regulations that say that we have to do this? No, not really. We've got guidelines from the AWWA. We've got these, good ideas that are coming from places. And then the presidential critical infrastructure mandate came out, and that gave us process control owners some teeth to start improving security and then us specifically for Glendale, the Super Bowl's coming. We're no longer some little 200,000 person city. We now have national attention on us, and then Stuxnet happened, which of course was the very first process control virus that impacted process control systems. About this time as coming out of the presidential mandate, the FBI is calling us and asking us, how many plants do you have? When you have issues, here's the phone number, reaching out to us. You know what? We're not such a little city anymore. We really do need to pay attention to this. Next slide, please. So as far as what happens if I tell, on the city of Glendale, we had this issue. Are there liability concerns for the city? Is it going to raise public awareness? Really the biggest threat to somebody saying that there's is not actually going wrong with the water system. Really the biggest threat is somebody says something bad's happened with the water system, which puts us in a defensive mode of we have to are now guilty until proven innocent. So any leaks or any complaints about or any concerns about the quality of the water that we produce instantly becomes an issue. And so there's hesitation to share anything with anybody. So we're struggling internally, and AWWA and other places, NIST and other places are giving us some reasonably good guidelines, but a Microsoft kills a SCADA process. Who do I tell about that? The SCADA system caught a virus. Who do I tell about that? A citizen, an engineering firm, the local FBI is asking for information that may be sensitive. What's the locations of all the well sites, and what are the locations of the treatment plants? What kind of SCADA hardware are you using? What kind of process control system are you using? What are you doing for software? And individuals outside of the plant in a white pickup truck taking pictures of the plant. Who do I notify about these different things that are happening, right? And what do I tell and who do I tell? And that was one of my first conversations with Chris. And Chris came back with really the perfect answer. What do I want to hear? So I want to hear specific actionable issues that are specifically for my system, which is particularly hard because I don't want to tell anybody what system I have. So I have to spend time searching through everything for every process control system. And at this point, I'm pretty okay doing with that, right? But what have I heard a little bit as far as the history? The FBI sends out stuff. I'm a member of the Arizona counterterrorism, and so they have monthly meetings where they give us updates about the only thing they ever email us directly is be vigilant, watch out for something. We can't tell you what it is. The only thing that was really close to being actionable from them was a list of IP addresses that are suspect addresses, and please scan our networks to see if any of those IP addresses ever came to come visit us. The SCADA software vendor and Microsoft, of course, they send out patches and we install them. If we want to take the time to go look about what we're installing them, we do, but typically they just get installed. And really kind of the biggest news thing is I get from the newspapers. You hear millions of records get released. SCADA on the internet is bad. Rootkits are getting more and more aggressive about getting into the system. A lot of fear, but really not a lot of actionable items. And then, of course, our industry's partners, when I'm going to my partners and saying, what's going on over there? What are you guys doing for security? They're having the same response we are. And nothing bad's happening. We're spending a lot of money on security and a lot of time looking at stuff for a boogeyman that's not really out there. We've never seen him actually hit us. So it's really a hard challenge, and as far as we're concerned about what to share, who to share it with, and glad to be a member of this so we can help work through those issues and get some good policies and procedures in place. And with that, I'm open for questions.
So just one quick comment before I throw it back to Debbie to introduce Kevin on this. But as you and I have discussed, this what to share is one of the huge issues. I think the technology for real-time knowledge sharing exists, and with Sarah, we're codifying some of that. The open source, like Kevin and the AWWA are doing for, walk through the processes, use cases. I like the way they put that together. But it's that specific actionable info point you just made that really is the key. For those, frankly, very small handful in the infrastructure space who are really, watching the knowledge being shared out there, we've got to, as you said, sort through it all to figure out which of these bits actually apply to them. So I think a lot of that speaks to the process we're all going through at this point in figuring out how we get some information from the right places to the right places in ways that can actually be used. So with that, Debbie, if you want to introduce Kevin. Kevin has some slides. I'll make you presenter while Debbie's talking through that.
As Security and Preparedness Program Manager for the American Water Works Association, Kevin Morley is responsible for collaborating with various regulatory agencies to ensure that the perspectives of AWWA's membership, as well as the water sector in general, are considered in the policy decision-making process. In addition, he is responsible for enhancing water sector security and preparedness capabilities by supporting the development of AWWA standards and initiatives, including the Water Wastewater Agency Response Network that can be found at nationalwarn.org. The American Water Works Association is the largest nonprofit, scientific, and educational association dedicated to managing and treating water, the world's most important resource. With approximately 50,000 members, AWWA provides solutions to improve public health, protect the environment, strengthen the economy, and enhance our quality of life. Chris, back to you.
Thank you, Debbie. And Kevin, if you want to take the conch and run with it, the floor is all yours. And you may be talking to your mute button, as is the common problem in today's webcasty world. Kevin, you want to check the mute on your phone? We're not hearing you at present.
Am I unmuted now?
You're unmuted now. Hello.
Okay, sorry about that. Two different controls here. Technology, right? That's what we're here to talk about. So, as Debbie noted, AWWA's been around for quite a long time, 1881 in fact, and our mission is development of guidance and best practices, amongst other things, but information sharing. So I appreciate this opportunity to be part of this conversation with the ICS ISAC and their mission that is shared in this particular subject area of cyber security. And today we happen to be talking about the water sector, but I think some of the things that we'll talk about are common to many critical infrastructure sectors. And so I wanted to take a little bit of an opportunity here to follow up on some of the specific things that you heard from Glendale and kind of back it up to I guess a national level, if you will. If I can make the screens change. And give a little context here for some of the key drivers. And a number of these things are changes in progress that have evolved here most recently with particular interest on the Executive Order 13636 on cybersecurity, but also notably PPD 21, which replaces HSPD 7, also has a fair amount of intent and purpose to converge what was formerly a primarily terrorism, physical security approach to a more all hazards combined approach to risk management for physical, cyber, and also integrating resilience. And then all those things factor into the activities in the water sector, which in part are culminated in the water sector specific plan that I'm going to use here as a little bit of baseline. But within that, without going into a lot of detail, these are the major goal areas, two of which are recognizing and reducing risks in the water sector and maintaining a resilient infrastructure, which again, the tasks at hand here and the subject of this conversation are really focused on. So that kind of gives us a consistent grounding across the sector of what our shared vision and mission is, and this requires a balanced approach. So from our perspective and what we bring to the table as AWWA, as a standards development organization are a number of different resources, including the 2 standards here at the top of the list that have been recognized by the Department of Homeland Security through their Safety Act program, and also the G440 standard on emergency preparedness practices. And I'm really going to focus on G430 as the baseline for this conversation, because I call that the umbrella standard. It gets into management commitment to the issue of security and preparedness, and within that, amongst the different requirements, is the need for protection of critical infrastructure, information systems, or process control systems. So here I've shown the list of the different requirements. You can see that commitment of management organizationally and the culture of the organization are very important, but also that lends itself to the issue at hand here with cybersecurity. And so some of the things I'm going to talk about are how we've tried to unpack that a little bit and provide a little bit more of an actionable approach that we see is being needed. So, as we talk about this thing from the water sector perspective, how do your operations change if you don't have SCADA? Obviously, as Chris noted in his opening, we've kind of been using water for a long time, and we didn't always have SCADA. So, but that being said, with the evolution of all these new technologies and process control systems to enhance efficiencies, energy efficiency, pump efficiencies, et cetera, manual operation isn't so effective anymore, and there's a certain amount of knowledge that may be lost there. But how do we ensure that we still maintain the delivery of this life support system that is so critical to basic life safety, fire suppression, and commerce in general? So one of the things that we know and that we've observed is, from a user, a water utility isn't a technology provider, they're a technology user. So we're only as good as, to some extent, as the sum of the parts. And as you can see from the first story here from Wired from back in 2012, not everything is quite up to snuff. So, if you're expecting me to get high mileage with square tires, I'm only going to be able to go so far. So there's some due diligence on the part of the technology providers to step up to the plate on this, but also on the part of the technology users. And in this eweek.com story, amongst others, the water sector is called out as being one of those sectors that has public-facing ISP addresses. Many may be familiar with Shodan, and I think a lot of folks in the water sector have corrected that since news of that vulnerability has been revealed and shared through things like the ICS ISAC and Our Water ISAC and AWWA and other outlets. But that's really important, and it's some of these basic kind of cyber hygiene things that we're trying to articulate and elevate awareness to. Certainly from a federal perspective, there's been greater awareness, and in terms of that information sharing, this may not necessarily be a function of, I think it's a combination of both awareness of the vulnerabilities and incidents, but also the information sharing that Jacques talked about. Who do I tell about this stuff? And so the federal government stood up the U.S. CERT program, and that's been a very effective resource for both information sharing, but also helping entities like a water utility or any other infrastructure sector that may have been impacted to come and do an evaluation and what can we learn from that. So what exactly is the problem? And I'm just going to kind of summarize here from a GAO report earlier about a year ago that there's no lack of guidance. The problem is there's just a lot of guidance and it's all over the place. And so the recommendation of the General Accounting Office is you need to develop better understanding of the guidance so that people can do something about it. And we have moved in that direction here in the water sector. And I think because of a couple of different things, we may be a little bit further along in some of our attention to this. Y2K obviously that was the first time we really probably thought about some of this stuff. While it didn't really manifest itself in terms of a security or continuity of service issue, it certainly could have, and I think that was the first look folks took. Shortly thereafter, there was the Bioterrorism Act of 2002 that on the drinking water side required utilities to do vulnerability assessments, which a lot of the information gathered during the Y2K analysis lent itself to that effort in terms of the cyber risk. Moving forward to 2008, we realized that there was kind of a growing concern about cybersecurity, in particular on process control systems or industrial control systems, depending on your proclivity there. But through a collaboration with the Department of Homeland Security and ultimately through our Water Sector Coordinating Council, we facilitated the development of this roadmap, which isn't really a plan for a utility per se, but is a look across the sector as to, what are our needs and what are the challenges to getting there. One of those key milestones was developing some recommended practices that can be widely applied in the water sector. Again, coming back to that J report, there's all kinds of standards, ISA 99, NIST 800, ABC 123, but for the average utility whose mission is really treatment of water, that's not in their direct wheelhouse, especially when you get outside the larger utilities that may not have in-house specialized staff focused on this stuff. So how do we make this stuff approachable and actionable and quite frankly digestible? And so more recently here in our 2013, this roadmap, this other roadmap here on the right side of the screen is really the sector strategic plan. And the number one priority in that plan is to advance the development of sector-specific cybersecurity resources. Roll that forward. That kind of coincides with what we've talked about here a little bit, Executive Order 13636, which I won't go into all the details of the cybersecurity framework, but there is a draft. There was an initial draft in August, another one issued in October, with an expectation of that being finalized in 2014. It's a very function-based kind of structure based on the items here identified: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, which is perfectly fine in kind of advancing the ball. Coinciding with the issuance of that executive order and our review of what was outstanding from that 2008 roadmap, AWA, through our Water Industry Technical Action Fund, decided to proceed in late 2012 with the development of guidance that will provide consistent and repeatable recommended course of action to reduce vulnerabilities in process control systems. I would like to say that the Obama administration read our RFP before they issued the executive order, but it was somewhat circumstanced that both were issued on the same day. But we have a shared objective, and with a slightly different approach per se that I'll explain here in a moment. But again, the focus is how do we make this actionable, and especially to the utility management. Remember, one of the top priorities or requirements in the G430 standard was to have management commitment to this issue. Well, if they can't understand the issue because they didn't come up in the technology field and they didn't have Twitter and Facebook when they were coming up through the ranks, I'm not saying that our management is technology at first, but it makes it hard to get your arms around. It's a virtual thing. It's hard to see. So the value and the risk associated with that is somewhat abstract. And so we're trying to make that less abstract and break it down. And so we believe that what we've developed here, originally intended for delivery in October 2013, due to a few delays, will probably be issued here in mid-January. But let me get to the point of what we're doing here. So I've acted as a project manager on that. We've had extensive input from subject matter experts, both utilities, vendors, consulting firms, folks like Chris, EPA, DHS, and the Water ISAC. And really what we came up with after lengthy survey and discussion with utilities was this list of 12 practice categories. And if you look at them and you're familiar with the NIST framework, there's a lot of overlap. We say potato, what they say potato, et cetera, et cetera. And the organization is, there's number one doesn't mean it's more important. It's just the way it shook out in conversations. But and then within that, there's about 52 different practices within these categories that really provide some actionable steps that a utility can take based on their use of technology to enhance their security. So again, I've mentioned this use case concept several times, and really what we try to do is how do we make this as accessible as possible, especially to smaller and medium-sized utilities that may not have somebody like Chris or Jacques on their staff that really kind of knows this stuff inside and out, because that's what their focus is. Smaller utilities, they may have to do lots of different things, including, small staff. So through this use case tool, a utility would indicate how they're applying a particular technology. Let's just use the case that remote access to a pump station, for example. And so based on that action or that use, a prioritized list of controls and practices would be provided to the utility so that it's not as daunting. If you look at across the board of all the different possible things that you could do based on all the standards that have been referenced by NIST and others, it can be quite overwhelming. And in that case, people kind of freeze up. They don't know where to start. What we've tried to do is break that cycle and break it down to be bite-sized, if you will, such that it's something that with limited resources, if the utility focused on the priority 1 steps or actions, they can begin to enhance the security of their system. Then they can move on to priority 2, 3, and 4, and so forth. And it allows you to run some different scenarios. So if you only want to look at remote access versus your whole system, that's fine. It's not a security assessment of your system. It's really just a designation of, if you do this, then you should do these things. And it's up to you to decide whether or not you already have them in place, or if there are things you need to add to your budget for the coming year to take that action. Again, we're not replacing or developing new standards. We're leveraging those existing standards and practices that are well known and documented from NIST and ISA and others, in addition to complementing some of the protocols that I already referenced from AWWA in terms of our security standards and what a utility should be doing in a global context to have a secure and robust program at their utility. So with that, I would just remind folks that without water, there's no coffee. And of course, I'm slightly biased here, but we're kind of the center of the critical infrastructure universe. A lot of people depend on us, but then again, we depend on a lot of other folks. So that requires a lot of information sharing and knowledge transfer. And certainly, we've learned a lot of things from other sectors and organizations like the ICS ISAC help facilitate that. So I again appreciate that opportunity to be here. So that's my contact information, Chris, if people have further questions, and they can follow up with me there, or happy to take those now as you so choose.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. And with that, I will take the visual contact here, hopefully, and show us that screen. So you touched on a lot of fascinating issues that are, of course, part of everything we're talking about here. It's that evolution of sharing. So one of the questions we get a lot these days, which I think is pertinent to the conversation of the era, is where does SARA fit into this? With the NIST cybersecurity framework and with ISA and everything else, and it's pointing to the evolution of sharing the way it's been done, as we've been talking about here with AWWA and before. We go back to OK Corral in 1881, and some Victorian gentlemen got together and decided, that, and they'd really just learned that there are little tiny swimming things in the water that might cause people to die of typhus and so forth. And that's evolved to where we are now. So the various artifacts that we have, the things like the cybersecurity framework, a good analogy for that is a physician's best reference. On our last monthly call with Mark Rutherford and Fred Cohen, we had this interesting conversation on this. It's if you can read the NIST cybersecurity framework, you're probably doing these things already. So the physician's best reference is a good analogy. We need that sort of thing, that table of contents, and this massive amount of existing standards and so forth. But if you're the average person, what do you do with that? And again, we need to break this down. That's why we have these different artifacts. The 50 to 100,000 water facilities in the U.S. don't all have people who can read the cybersecurity framework. They need something for them that says, here is how you do things in your world. And as I say, I like the use case analogy. Now, here's an example of you. With Sarah, we're looking to provide another cross-sector view of information sharing and consumption and situational awareness in that same sort of pamphlet version. Something that the doctor gives you so that you can actually follow the instructions at home and do something. And with the two of you on the phone today, this is that perfect sort of example. We have an information guidance producer with the IWA, and we have a consumer with the city of Glendale. So I guess, Jacques, I'm interested in your thoughts. We've discussed this before the call a little bit, but in your view of your interaction with the AWWA, where a municipality and someone in your position is looking for guidance and information, how you see the guidance from AWWA and NIST interleaving, for example.
All right, so that slide where he showed the roadmap to secure your process control system that was circa, I don't think, 2006 or so. I actually have a copy of that printed out in a 3-ring binder sitting up within arm's reach of my chair. It's a great reference, and I use that to help curtail questions from newly promoted plant supervisors that want to say, hey, I want to be able to sit at home with my iPad and see what's going on at my water treatment plant. And then I bring that book out and I beat them over the head and shoulders politely, of course, and say, no, you don't really want to do that. Remember back in the old days, people had to go out and start pumps and actually touch them and feel them and smell them. And so that kind of support is very good. Kevin's comments are exactly right. I feel blessed to be in this city that's the size enough that can afford to staff, can afford me and my staff to sit the time. And I have begrudgingly gone all the way through NIST 800. 82 is my favorite one. Took me about 3 days at night reading it without, so I wouldn't hurt myself when I fell asleep reading it. But it is actually good information. But then you compare that against the Department of Homeland Security has a cyber threat, not a cyber threat assessment tool. That's not a threat, right? But they've got a tool which is a list of questions, and along with the U.S. CERT, and so it does get a bit monotonous reading. Change your passwords, build disaster recovery. It's I get it. We got that. We do need to do that stuff. I feel blessed that we've got a lot of those things, rudimentary things in there. So I'm very happy to see AWWA step up and give a stepping stone for use cases so we can help educate the rest of the departments, and for that matter, the smaller cities that are around us that are looking for guidance.
So, Kevin, when you look at the entire population of AWWA, what's your feel for the demographics? How many water facilities out there have someone like Jacques who actually even knows what the NIST framework or the NIST standard numbers are and are able to use them?
Well, let's not make it specific, let's just talk water sector at large. And just on the drinking water side alone, there's roughly 52,000 drinking water systems, community drinking water systems. But the preponderance of those systems serve less than 3,000 people. And in terms of, you guys, you're over 100,000, aren't you, in Glendale?
Yeah, we're actually over 200,000.
Right. So there's about 40,000 systems that are kind of what I would consider small or very small, less than 3,000 population served. Okay, look at the little dots on the U.S. map. They're not going to have Jacques. And then you've got a good chunk of utilities right there in the middle, and then you've got the bigger systems that like Glendale and others. And those big systems probably number less than somewhere between 500 to 700. So what you usually end up having is somebody that, you know, they know what the PLC and the RTU are supposed to be doing, and that, you know, this part goes here, but they become, in the smaller and medium systems, they become quite dependent on service providers, like, you know, just a technology vendor, which is fine. But if they don't know what a ping sweep is, they don't know how to ask for that in part of their service level agreement. And so part of the mission of the resource that we've developed here is to empower the utility to take ownership of the risk, quite frankly, and know if they can't do it themselves, that they can say, hey, if we're going to do remote access into our pump stations, like Jacques was saying, these are the protocols that we need to be ensured are in place, and they can add that to their contract or specification. So, you know, one objective here is elevating awareness. One is educating them on the steps that they can take to manage the risk and take ownership of the risk, and then do something about it. Because lots of times what I hear, Chris, is, well, nobody's doing anything. And I'm like, well, you know, for years, and you know this as well, I've heard a lot of people telling us that we have a problem, but I haven't heard a lot of people giving me solutions. There are a lot of people out there that tell me there's a problem, but they've been quite silent on, well, okay, so what do you want me to do about it? And so this is our, you know, a step in that direction to give a utility a solution. Doesn't eliminate the risk, but it helps them manage it.
Well, and that's exactly right. This is a very common thread, you know, in this year, calendar year, we're just wrapping up. You know, we've talked, you know, there's the SMART out there, right? We talk a lot about the 300, you know, there's like 300, 3,000, whatever, you know, people are really involved in this you can really talk to. But there's 52,000 water systems. What do we do with that? You know, 6,000, over 6,000 electric utilities. There's hundreds of thousands manufacturing, building management, millions, and so forth, the systems out there. How do we reach out to them? And it's, you know, one of the points you made there is the service providers. You know, a large part of our focus, again, marking that point in evolution. The ISACs have developed primarily in a vertical industry focus, looking to create direct relationships with the facilities themselves, which is good when you're doing this transitional period and there's 300 or 3,000 people you can talk to, but it doesn't scale. So, you know, which is one of the reasons that so much of our membership are the vendors, the consultants, and the integrators, where we can share information with one organization, the AWWA, or we can share information with the AWWA. We know that can propagate out. So that's, and we've seen these things all the time. And I think it's really important for people to understand that while there's a lot of new in all this, there's nothing new in all this. You know, these are the same things we've been doing forever. And it's all part of a continuum. You know, when you see where you've been in the past, it gives you a better idea of where you are right now, and more importantly, lets you know where you're going in the future. So we sit here with, you know, and I'll tell you, you know, Jacques earlier raised the point, you raised the point as well, is, with a lot of this, well, nothing's happened. Therefore, how do I prioritize what's going on? And based on the briefings that we're privy to and so forth, it's interesting. Not to be alarmist about this. I think that that's, as you said, that's most of what we hear right now is that look at all these vulnerabilities, look at these threats and so forth, and we really need to get pragmatic and create guidance and keep these conversations going and keep expanding that 300, 3,000, 30,000, 300,000 and do something about it. But this calendar year has been traumatic. These last several months have been traumatic in the increase in not just the potential threat, but active threats. Systems are around the world are getting probed and misused by all the cast of characters who were poisoning the wells literally, throughout history. So the time is very much common, and the fact that you're creating, in 2008 made that roadmap, in 2013-14 are creating this next more applied level of granularity. We're working on that we're working on our project with Sarah. Each of these individually are useful artifacts, but for the broader purpose, they're indications of where we're moving, and I think they're guidance to what all the related players out there want to focus on. So we're in our last 10 minutes. Jacques, I'd be interested in getting any comments from you, but to feed that, your interaction and reliance with external parties and vendors and so forth. Can you speak to that for a minute? How do you interact with the vendor space and the consultancy and so forth?
Well, as far as the city of Glendale is coming out of the presidential thing, and in 2004 we did a security threat assessment for the entire water system. SCADA obviously was a part of that, physical security a big part of that. They came out with a threat assessment and a master plan executed for us. They are still our security consultant, so when I see something in the news, I will call them up and say, can you give me some insight, can you tell me what's been going on with that in the industry? The other part of it is the SANS group that's in New Mexico. They're always testing for new water sensors and stuff like that, and so we try to work with them as far as whatever they've got going on. If they got some new sensors to test, we try to be proactive with them also about that. On the but back to information sharing. Yeah, our security contractors that we have was one, and two is we have several servers and several networks, and monitoring logs is a challenge. We're kind of obligated to read. It's great to have an intrusion detection system or have logging enabled, but we want to be more proactive than more reactive. So we're talking about getting outside contractors, trusted outside contractors, to be doing logging reviews for us. So really, that's kind of about the big picture. There's industry security experts in the water world. There's IT security experts that we talk with, and AWA is a great resource, along with Black & Veatch and CH2M Hill and some of these other bigger water contractors.
Well, and that's and again, to be pedantic about the point, it's interesting. It's good that you're doing these things. It's interesting that you're doing it at this time. I think further gives indication for the commercial space. We all know that one of the problems in all of this is that commercial, like a lot of the folks listening now and listening to the future, are these commercial entities, and the people inside the commercial entities that are trying to make a business case to put the resources into this entire infrastructure sector. And traditionally, there hasn't been the opportunity. That trusted partners reviewing your security, for example. It's only been the last couple of years that service providers have been able to make a living and have groups of people doing that. And as a single litmus out there, the fact that Glendale, Arizona is starting to do this should, I think, be taken as a lesson by the sector-specific and broader consultancies out there that we're getting into the space where they can get their management, get their organizations behind building the commercial solutions that we have to have on a broad scale if we're really going to address this. So we're in the last 5 minutes now. Kevin, do you have any additional thoughts you want to throw out there, views to what you see coming over the next couple of years, perhaps, or anything else you want to add before we have Debbie wrap for us?
I mean, you know, you could speculate on what the boys and girls at the other end of Pennsylvania are going to do at the Capitol. Certainly been the scepter of legislative action in this space, but I think and I hope not only because of their own inabilities to do what they're supposed to do, but on this particular issue, I would hope for a little bit of moderation and socialization of the NIST framework, and let sectors like water and others kind of modulate to what does that mean for them, so that we can see how a voluntary approach can apply. I think there's obviously, you know, in the case of Glendale is a case in point, you know, even in the absence of a mandate, Jacques and his team have taken, you know, risk management as part of their mission, you know, and I think, you know, the limiting factor has been a comprehensive knowledge set or action plan to enable certain entities to do things that may be less well-resourced as somebody like Glendale. So, you know, I think in some cases it's frustrating that there's a presumption of, you know, well, this isn't important, so I'm going to blow it off. And I think that's really not the case, especially in the case of the water sector. We've indicated time and again that we're very conscious stewards of public health and the environment, and, you know, having been established back in the 1880s, you know, many years before EPA and federal regulation was in this space, we did a lot to manage risk to the public. In fact, one of the greatest risk management actions in the 20th century was chlorination of drinking water, according to the CDC and others. So, you know, to say that we don't take risk management seriously because, you know, I can't prove that I've done some cybersecurity step I think is a little bit misplaced. And given the dynamic nature of the threat environment, a legislative regulated approach, I think, would be severely challenged. You know, Jacques mentioned the CSET tool, which actually originated in the water sector, but, you know, that's a great resource. It tests your system against some of the standards that we've mentioned on the call today, but it still wouldn't, I believe, let you know that you're vulnerable to Stuxnet. So, you know, compliance doesn't mean risk-free. So I think, you know, I think we need to kind of measure action with wisdom here as to what our expectations are on some of these things, and allow the owners and operators to take some initiative on their own and do some things to manage the risk.
Well said.
That's a little soapbox. I apologize, but
oh, that's okay. The floor is littered with soapboxes, and I think we need to use them as early and as often as possible. So thank you guys both for being here. Thanks to all of our membership for the support of our activities. Going forward, you know, we have these sessions typically with the third Wednesday of every month. This is actually the anniversary of the first time we've done this. So the ISAC going into next year will finish off its second full year of operations, and we're looking now at having a conference at Georgia Tech in September of next year. I think it's an interesting example of the things we're talking about. A lot of the conferences, a lot of the conversations have been about the risks and vulnerabilities and so forth. And we've been working with our membership and others to develop a forum where we can make these actionable, where we can provide education and information about what you do, not just the fact that things are vulnerable. top of the hour. Debbie, if you want to dance us out, we'll put this recording up on the website and distribute it through other means so people can share from the knowledge. Thanks again.
Jacques, Kevin, thank you both so much for your thoughts and insights that you've shared on today's call. And to our audience, on behalf of all of us at the ICS ISAC, we appreciate your joining us today. We hope that you found the information of value and something that you can take and implement to further secure your industrial control systems. Our next public briefing will be held Wednesday, January 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern and feature a panel of distinguished subject matter experts presenting If You Build It, Sarah and the Global Knowledge Network. Our other sessions will be announced in our monthly updates, on the Center's website, and in our other communication vehicles. Thank you all again for your participation on today's call.